Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
Today, Wednesday, November 18th, is the feast of the dedication of the papal basilicas of St. Peter's and St. Paul's. And these are today's headlines. Pope Francis presents Mary as a woman of prayer and a model of prayer for us during his general audience. The Holy See's Secretary for Relations with States has condemned violence against religions or beliefs. And the Church strives to assist refugees fleeing violence in Cameroon. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells. Our top story today, Pope Francis on Wednesday continued his series of catecheses on prayer, holding up the Virgin Mary as a model for our own lives. The Pope was speaking during the weekly general audience that was streamed live from the Vatican's Apostolic Palace. Linda Bordoni has this report.
Pope Francis greeted the faithful with the words, "Today we meet the Virgin Mary as the prayerful woman."
Oggi incontriamo la Vergine Maria come donna orante.
He recalled her in her youth, describing her as the young girl of Nazareth, wrapped in silence in dialogue with God, who would soon entrust her with a mission. The Pope went on to describe how Mary waited for God to take the reins of her path and guide her, and how she prepared with great docility the grand events in which God takes part in the world. Her whole life was marked by prayer, he said, and by a trusting obedience that is characteristic of those who are open to God's will.
In un atteggiamento di apertura, cuore aperto a Dio.
This is an attitude, he explained, that allows many believers to face reality without getting upset when their days are filled with problems, knowing that in humble love offered in each situation, we become instruments of God's grace. Mary, the Pope said, prayerfully accompanied the newborn Church, and through her openness to the power of the Holy Spirit, the Mother of God thus became the Mother of the Church.
Cioè, pregando con la Chiesa nascente, diventa Madre della Chiesa.
St. Luke tells us that Mary treasured all the trials and events of her life and pondered them in her heart, so they passed through the sieve of prayer and were transfigured by it. The Mother keeps everything and brings it to her dialogue with God, Pope Francis concluded. How beautiful it would be if we too could be a bit like our Mother.
Che bello, se anche noi potremmo assomigliare un po' alla nostra madre.
I'm Linda Bordoni.
In other news, the Holy See has once more condemned violence against religions or beliefs, as well as forms of populism and nationalism that regard migrants and refugees as others and enemies. The Vatican's Secretary for Relations with States, Archbishop Paul Richard Gallagher, made the point at the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom, which took place November 16th through the 17th. The annual event is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State and brings together leaders from around the world to discuss the challenges facing religious freedom. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this year's summit was held online. Addressing the event on Monday, Archbishop Gallagher indicated two paths on how to counteract the challenges of populism and violence against religion.
One critical dimension is the necessity of interreligious and intercultural dialogue to foster mutual understanding and respect. This must be done in a sincere and authentic way, seeking more than mere tolerance with its negative connotation, and move beyond seeing the other as an enemy, but as a brother and a sister equal to us in dignity. It is this sort of dialogue that is necessary to build fraternity and social friendships, which are necessary to have peaceful coexistence in our pluralistic societies. Another crucial aspect is that civil authorities should bear in mind and respect the fundamental right of religious freedom for all. This right is rooted in the inner dimension of the human person. As such, governments should welcome an open dialogue with leaders of all religious backgrounds, seeking effective ways to protect, to promote, and to implement the freedom of religion or belief for the common good of society, for the good of each person, and not manipulated as a political tool. As Pope Francis states in Fratelli Tutti, we Christians ask that in those countries where we are a minority, we be granted guaranteed freedom, even as we ourselves promote that freedom for non-Christians in places where they are a minority. One fundamental human right must not be forgotten in the journey towards fraternity and peace. It is religious freedom for believers of all religions. End of quotation.
That was Archbishop Paul Richard Gallagher, Secretary for Relations with States. For the past 11 years, Cameroon has been faced with 2 armed conflicts and no peace prospects in sight. That means living is dire for many refugees. While in the northern region of Cameroon, the Boko Haram jihadist insurgency began in about 2010, in the northwest and southwest regions, the fighting between the Cameroonian army and Anglophone separatists flared up into a full-scale war in 2017. Millions of people have been forced to flee their lands. Father Bikomson, the director of the Archdiocese of Calabar's Justice, Development, Peace Commission, told Father Paul Samasumo that because of the influx of refugees, local infrastructure has been stretched to the limit, and the impact on already poor and struggling host communities is visible.
We've responded to the plight of the asylum seekers, and the core areas we've been able to reach out to these people. We've been able to provide vulnerability assessments, protection, provision of food and non-food items, health support, wash and livelihood support, and we've been able to provide some pastoral care also for some of the refugees, especially those who are Catholics.
What would be your appeal, Father?
Well, my major appeal for now would be to see how support can be given to the diocese to be able to carry on this intervention the more. And we are hoping to get a center where most refugees who come into the state can stay a day or 2 or 3, as the case may be, to find their feet in the city before they are taken to the National Refugee Commission for registration. And sometimes the registration takes a bit of time, so they need somewhere to stay, somewhere they could have food to eat, and they could just feel a bit at home until they are really settled. So we'll need quite a lot of support in that area.
That was Father Bikomson, director of the Archdiocese of Calabar's Justice, Development, and Peace Commission, speaking with Father Paul Samasumo. Elsewhere, in an unprecedented move, U.S. legal authorities have announced they're dropping all drug trafficking and money laundering charges against Mexico's former Minister of Defense, who was arrested there last month, in order for him to be returned to Mexico, where he will face the accusations. James Blears has this report from Mexico City.
Retired General Salvador Cienfuegos Cepeda, who was Mexico's Minister of Defense from 2012 to 2018, was arrested last month in Los Angeles International Airport, accused of drug trafficking and money laundering for an offshoot of the Beltran-Leyva drug cartel, which also involved him allegedly protecting them from law and order. He denies all the charges. He was due to appear in a U.S. court today to answer those charges, but in an extraordinary turn of events, prosecutors from the Eastern District of New York have announced the United States has determined that sensitive and important foreign policy considerations outweigh the government's interests in pursuing the prosecution of the defendant. Under escort, the general will be returned to Mexico to face these accusations. This has been jointly agreed by U.S. Attorney General William Barr and his opposite number Alejandro Gertz Manero. The Mexican government was outraged and livid that the Drugs Enforcement Agency, the DEA, hadn't shared a shred of evidence leading up to the general's arrest on U.S. soil, had lodged a formal complaint, and the incident threatened to have serious and long-lasting effects and consequences on bilateral cooperation. All eyes will now be on the Mexican legal system to determine that justice will indeed be done if the transferred case against the general is proved. A great deal is at stake. For Vatican News, James Blears reporting.
Earlier this week, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the prefect of the Congregation for Evangelization of Peoples, led an online formation session on the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. He outlined the methodology of Pope Francis in writing the encyclical.
The method used by Pope Francis in this encyclical, which he has been consistently using in his other writings, if people would pay attention not only to the contents of his writings, but also to his method, his pedagogy, then I think many people who have some questions about his teaching would understand him better. First is reading and analyzing the situation, always with the eyes on the present world and the trends that we find in the present world. Then comes the interpretation in the light of faith. So it's not enough to see and to analyze, but to interpret, to go to the deeper meaning of what we have seen. And here it is the moment of discernment and judgment towards a world that is more open to love. Then the third method is responding. It is not enough to see and to interpret in the light of faith. We are asked also to respond. And in this case, in Fratelli Tutti, the response is how to construct a world, a humanity that is more open and therefore a better place to live in.
The countdown is almost over. Tomorrow, Thursday, November 19th, the Economy of Francis event kicks off, setting into motion the 12 EOF thematic villages that will be working on key topics relating to a new and more just model of economy. Among the members of the organizing committee for the Economy of Francis is Valentina Rotondi, a postdoctoral researcher at Oxford University and at the SUPS University in Lugano. Valentina, who is also coordinating the CO2 of Inequalities Village, told Linda Bordoni of her hopes for the event.
This initiative is completely innovative and completely new in the background of events related to social science and economics and real economic work. And I really think it will change the way we think about our economy, the way we think about people living in our economy, and how we can change this economy that is producing too much bad things for people all around the world.
What exactly will your contribution be?
So I'm basically coordinating workshops, and in particular a workshop that will involve Kate Raworth and John Perkins, together with 12 young people from all around the world, from the 12 different villages that have realized the economy of Francesco. And then I will listen. I will listen to the contribution of several other important people around the world. And these people are young people trying to change their economic background in their countries of origin and also in the world in general.
So it's a very intense 3-day event. Of course, it has to continue, though. In what way will the legacy of these 3 days be brought forward?
This is a sort of middle way event because the process has already started. So we have already worked quite hard with the other villages during the last year or so, and we will continue this process over the next years.
And that was Valentina Rotondi, a member of the organizing committee for the Economy of Francis event. You can follow the Economy of Francis event beginning tomorrow at our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. Many thanks this afternoon go to our producers and sound engineers in studio, without whom this broadcast would not be possible. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells.